In this episode, I got to sit down with Andy Rieger of J. Rieger Co. And this is one of my favorite brands of all time. Not to mention, it's one of my favorite experiences of all time walking into their physical location. This story of how he revived his great-great-great-grandfather's recipe from Prohibition and then turned it into this amazing experience in this giant distillery that has everything from making their product to selling their product in really unique, creative ways. And how Andy and I got to dive into some of the challenges he's had from growing the brand to opening a facility and then managing it into this big facility concept that is now food and beverage, operations, events, and more. Check out this episode with Andy Rieger and J. Rieger Co. I hope you enjoy. What's up, everybody? Do you own or manage a facility? Well, you're in the right place. Welcome to the Facility Playbook. I'm Luke Wade, founder and CEO of Facility Ally, and this podcast is about helping facility managers and owners learn from pioneers and veterans in the industry who have built and managed successful sports facilities, entertainment venues, and clubs. Did you know that most of the facilities I just mentioned use between 4 to 6 different softwares to manage their membership, rentals, leagues, camps, clinics, and more? Facility Ally to the rescue. Revolutionize your facility with Facility Ally's all-in-one system. Learn more at facilityally.com. Today, we're here drinking whiskey with Andy Rieger, J. Rieger Co. Appreciate you, man. And I'm going to let you introduce yourself while I take a sip of this delicious whiskey.
Andy Rieger. I'm the co-founder, president of J. Rieger Co. J. Rieger Co. is a distillery that we refounded in 2014. And I use the phrase refounded because in 1887, it was actually founded by Jacob Rieger, hence the J in J. Rieger Co. And Jacob was my great-great-great-grandfather. Family ran it for 38 years until Prohibition ended up killing it in 1919. Or 32 years, 32 years, sorry. 32 years until Prohibition killed it. And 2014, we brought it back in the East Bottoms of Kansas City, a historical part of our city. And bringing back this history has been something not just for the company, but for the area. And now we're in this beautiful building that, as you would call it, this beautiful facility.
Yes, it is an amazing facility. If you've not seen it, we're in Kansas City, Missouri. As he said, the East Bottoms, not something you normally hear. But to Andy's credit and his team, they've been able to revitalize this amazing neighborhood. I feel like history should be your middle name because, you know, you've done so much around history in this facility and this neighborhood and everything. And I got to ask, because I've never asked you this, and we've known each other for quite a while, but did you grow up hearing this story? Or how did this, as you grow up, do you hear about your great-great-great-great-grandfather and the whiskey? And are you guys making it while you're, growing up before you brought it back to life?
So I always say it this way, that when you think about the Wayne family history, it's just that. It's if you know a piece of information, you know it, and it's wonderful, and it's part of your story, and you're more concerned what's for dinner. Is there milk in the fridge? And so growing up, it was the exact same way, where I always grew up with old shot glasses that were 135-year-old relics, old, very, very frail paper advertisements, old whiskey bottles, whatnot, empty. And growing up, though, like I just said, they're relics. They're just that. They're, instead of a family photo on a shelf, it's an old whiskey bottle. Or it's right next to an old family photo. And did you ever really know the story? You don't really care to know the story because you just know my family made whiskey back then. Are we having cookies for dessert tonight, Dad? And that's really the way that it played out. And even as a kid, I was stupid at times where when we would steal parents' liquor, we would drink them out of 135-year-old shot glasses. And so we didn't realize sort of the valuable nature of each shot glass or how fragile they were or how meaningful they would become someday in life. So knowing that it existed, yes. Understanding really what went into it, what it was all about, and what to do with it in the future, no. So 2 totally different concepts, but recognizing that it existed all the way.
So when did it become, obviously you brought it back to life, and then the facility we're sitting in came years later. I mean, the actual room we're sitting in, I know, came years later, but you started it back up in part of this building and then expanded. So maybe walk me through how it went from we're bringing the whiskey back to life to let's create this amazing facility.
Yeah, so restarting it really, and for those viewers that went to the Rieger restaurant or manifesto, those were really big components to the revival story of it because the Rieger family built, before Prohibition started, this beautiful hotel to coincide with Union Station opening in the 1915 era. And when Union Station moved from the West Bottoms, which is where the distillery originally was, to where we know Union Station to be today, it used to be called Union Depot back then. But a bunch of business owners bought land right around Union Station and where it was going to go in order to build hotels to service all the travelers coming into town. So the Riegers were no different. They did that. And then after Prohibition started, they sold it off because it no longer had a valuable interest in where it would be able to promote the distillery as a part of the hotel as sort of a secondary purpose beyond just selling rooms every night. So being that it was long gone forever, it wasn't really until 2010 when the restaurant and Manifesto popped up in there from totally different groups of people. And when I met those guys, we started talking about the idea of reviving the old distillery. And so it took about 4 years in that process, getting a lot of really good experts involved, guys that ran Maker's Mark, Tanqueray, Sales for Diageo, those types of things where you're bringing experts into the fold. But the real big thing was, where are you going to do it? Where are you going to set up shop? And the whole idea that J. Rieger & Co. has this deep entrenchment into history, as you just alluded to, you had to do it in an area that had those historical components to it. West Bottoms, River Market, Crossroads, East Bottoms, where we are today. And the interesting thing about the East Bottoms is that the building that we're sitting in today was originally constructed as part of, well, not this building in particular, but these grounds were part of an old brewing operation that was the largest brewery to the west of the Mississippi in the pre-Prohibition years, known as the Heim Brewery, H-E-I-M. And so John McDonald, who founded Boulevard, actually approached us in 2012, I believe it was, and said, hey, I own these buildings in this little-known area called the East Bottoms. You guys should check it out. Really cheap rent. Let me know. So in looking at this space, came down, and where we are right now is this warehouse built in 1987 that was an annex to the old bottling facility for the Heim Brewery. And this space was dirt cheap if we wanted to rent it. So it fit the historical idea that we were going into these historical alcohol grounds at a historical part of the city. It fit the standpoint from, it was 15,000 square feet. It had high ceilings. And when you're starting a business up, as you know, money is everything. And it was really, really cheap. It cost us $2,500 a month for our first few years, renting 15,000 square feet and operating. But in starting in this warehouse, I mean, there was no retail component to it whatsoever. And so as we sort of began in this area just on the manufacturing side of things, eventually we decided that things worked out pretty well. We needed to grow. And in sort of sticking to history, as we knew we were going to try to acquire this building, the large building next to us that we ended up renovating, buying our parking lot and all those components, what were we going to call it? And in calling it something, I kept researching, and, you know, obviously Electric Park was the first amusement park that was in this neighborhood, first amusement park in the city. And it was the original origins for a lot of the concepts that the Disney theme parks utilize today because of Walt Disney sneaking into the second iteration of it, discovering the fireworks at night, the water fountains everywhere, things that started literally 100 feet from where you and I are sitting today. And so from that, it just came down to, I'll never forget, I was sitting in one of our council members' offices in 2017, and I said to her, we are going to do these things in this neighborhood. We don't know what incentives we need, but I just want to sort of let you know in advance so you can be on the lookout and you know what we're trying to accomplish. And she said, remind me of the area again, Andy. And I go, the area we're talking about is East Bottoms. She goes, my husband and I love going down there. And I go, really? What do you do when you go to the East Bottoms? And she goes, we love everything right around Kemper Arena. And I go, that's the West Bottoms. And she goes, what did you say? And I go, the East Bottoms. And she responded with, where is the East Bottoms? And the only problem with that statement is that the East Bottoms was her district at that time. So in my brain, I thought to myself, okay, so if our council person who is over this district doesn't even know what it is, how can I anticipate or expect the public to recognize that? So throughout all the research, I just finally came to it where I just said, Electric Park. That's what we're going to call our neighborhood. After the original amusement park that sort of set the scene for what became the Disney theme parks, we're just going to call this the Historic Electric Park District because we're right next to those historical grounds. So we got parks to change their name of the park back to Electric Park. And in every single interview, we just call it Electric Park or the Historic Electric Park District, one of the two. And creating that general tie to history is something that people want to dive into, make it more fun. And then obviously, as you know, we even opened a bar and called it Electric Park. And so you're creating that tie even deeper.
I love it so much.
Now I'm going to go back to...
Yeah, please. That was amazing. You probably need a sip after all that knowledge. And people watching, not from Kansas City or even probably from Kansas City, probably have no idea that all the stuff you just mentioned happened in this area, or I didn't even know the story of the councilwoman, and that's why you were so specific about Electric Park. I didn't know that. but it was a marketing challenge. You were trying to get away from people being confused about West Bottoms and East Bottoms. It's like, no, we're the electric park, we're history, we're all those things. And that's just one of the challenges that you've had in this facility. So maybe talk about some of the, let's talk about how big it is now. Let's talk about what it is today. We talked a lot about history. So what is J. Rieger & Co. today, and what is this distillery facility today?
Yeah, so we've got really two business units, more or less. 4 operating divisions, 2 business units. Our 2 business units are distribution and hospitality. And so think of it as to where you use your credit card when you interact with our brand. If you use it for doing something on a property that we own, then that's our hospitality division. If you are utilizing it on a property we don't own but our products are at, that's our distribution division. And so liquor stores, restaurants, bars, whatever that may be. So from there, you think about sort of where we came from and where we are now. So we started at 15,000 square feet purely as a manufacturing entity. And really cool thing about this barrel dining room that we're sitting in right now is not only is this arguably the coolest room in the entire city of Kansas City, if not the coolest alcohol room in the country, but this is actually where our first still sat. So it has a lot of meaning beyond just the general idea of how cool it is. So having that sort of connection to the history of the revival of the organization is really meaningful too. But so we started in this 15,000 square foot building, and then in acquiring 46,000 square foot or 48,000 square foot of historical structure that's to our north, acquiring the acre parking lot, acquiring an acre to the east side of us, what we were able to do is really take what we had started with, which was purely a manufacturer trying to figure out the branding, the manufacturing style, the product formulation, how the public interacts with it. And once we had that figured out, we knew we could always create an on-site experience. But if we started with the on-site experience, that's what we've been defined as. And so we didn't want to become defined as a place. We instead wanted to be defined as a company or a brand that has an incredible home. And so that's where 5 years after we launched, we were able to relaunch in the even bigger space that we had master planned. And we created 25,000 square feet of consumer spaces, from a 1/4 acre garden bar to a 1,200 square foot cocktail lounge in the basement that's high end, to a 5,000 square foot social lounge. You have this 500, 600 square foot private dining room within our barrel warehouse. We've got a full-blown tasting room and atrium that's like a greenhouse. So the idea that every single space is completely different. So that when you are in the high-end cocktail bar, which is called the Hey Hey Club, the cocktails, the experience, the lighting, the furniture, the staff, the uniforms, the food, the drinks, everything is completely unique to that space. No different than how the Monogram Lounge on the second floor, the 5,000 square foot lounge, all the food, the drinks, the staff, the uniforms, the furniture, the music, the ambiance, it's all completely unique to that space. And so it's the outside is the same way. Everything is the epitome of you as an adult, what you would want a second floor social lounge that overlooks a distillery. What is the epitome of the drinks that you would expect to have? What is the epitome of the food that you would expect to have? What is the service style you would expect to have? Basement, same thing. What is the epitome to you as an adult? Outside, what is the epitome to you? And what you'll understand is each of those spaces, when you run those through in your brain, it's all different. The drinks that you would want while sitting outside in a garden bar are vastly different than sitting in a basement high-end cocktail bar with a fireplace on a winter night. Totally different. And so what we do as a challenge to all of us is, how do we make all those experiences completely unique so that we've built a district, so that when you come down here with your wife, it's not just you go to a bar for 2 hours and you leave and you go to a different part of town. Instead, it is, okay, great, you've built enough for me to be able to say, this is our night. This is our afternoon. When we're going out, we're here for 4 hours. And that's why we're seeing people from Lawrence, Olathe, Lee Summit, St. Joe coming in and spending their entire night out with us, because we've been able to create enough of those adult experiences where we don't have kids around, we're not seeing fighting, we're not seeing people drinking so much that they're vomiting. It's just this adult crowd that feels really comfortable coming to, the plug of, we've done a really good job in general figuring out East Side development and how to bring people to a neighborhood that they otherwise would be fearful of otherwise.
Sure. So do you feel like and I love the way you brought up, I didn't know that you're trying to keep people here for longer, which obviously makes sense. Everybody wants to do that, but you're looking at it as like, they're going to come and spend an entire day here. for me, the different concepts also do another thing, and they bring different demographics, right? Like somebody may come and just go to the Hey Hey Club and love it there, but may not necessarily like sitting outside, or like some people may like sitting outside and maybe the Hey Hey Club's not really their style. So do you feel like it's also targeting different groups of people so you're full all the time, not counting on one segment of people to come in every time?
Yeah, so twofold in your answer in general. So the first one is, do we need people to stay? No. But what we've really discovered, and I did a lot of research into this because I'd never done development before this project. So I sort of had to learn it on the fly and really asked a lot of developers in different parts of the country. How do you do it? How do you think about it? Whether that be on the incentive side or on the actual conceptual side. And so you sort of understand the synopsis as a whole of what we are and where we are. The number one complaint that I got when trying to raise capital for this project was no one is ever going to come to this neighborhood. This neighborhood is just too far gone. It was an original part of Kansas City. It was the literal original destination of everything in Kansas City. This is the farm ground, by the way, that we are in that fed in Kansas City. So the East Bottoms was the farming, River Market was the commerce, West Bottoms was industrial. And so think of it from that sense in general. And when we started out, this is a very, very historical part of Kansas City's history that no one knows about, no one even thinks about. So how do you get people to go to a neighborhood for the first time? And that's really the thing we had to solve. And whenever you've never been to a neighborhood for the first time that's here, we'll call it as it is, on Kansas City's east side, immediately you assume you don't go to that neighborhood because of the danger. And so I broke it down to 3 areas that perfectly match your question. The first one were carrots, which is exactly what you hit on. What are the carrots that bring you down to our facility for the first time? Those could be, we have historical exhibit, historical renovation, outdoor bar, high-end basement cocktail bar, social lounge, tours, visual manufacturing operation, tasting room, gardens, private events, cool dining spaces, whatever that is. Alcohol just as the attraction, whatever that is. But hopefully there are enough things that check a box in your brain, or at least there's one thing that checks a box in your brain, just like no matter what group you're with. As long as someone knows what we offer, there's something for everybody, so that when someone says, let's go down to J. Rieger Co., you're saying yes for a completely different reason than this person is saying yes, than this person is saying yes. And when that occurs, then everyone's like, great, we're excited to go down, albeit for different reasons. The next one is first impressions. First impressions have to be immaculate because I can't control your drive or your experience here. And again, everyone wants to be negative, going to that place they've never been to in their life for the first time. So whether walking in, driving in, walking into the building, upstairs, downstairs, outside, whatever it is, that first impression has to be immaculate. The last one is experience. So that hopefully by the end of your time when you're leaving, every single person in your group talks about on the way out what an awesome experience it was. Big part of that is why you also leave going down a slide.
Yep.
Because then everyone's laughing and happy, and 2 or 3 drinks in, once you go down a slide and you're leaving, you're high-fiving your friends, and then your one friend that says, it'd be great if it was located in a more centralized area. Hopefully someone in the group goes, yeah, but it was the coolest experience ever, and it's worth coming down there because we stay there all day. It's not a bar that we hop to and move all around. Instead, it is our destination.
Well, amazing, all of that. Number one, definitely can relate to that. You guys have overcome so many challenges in this location, more than we ever did, but Casey Crew definitely can relate in that when I started my business and we built those same volleyball courts on the riverfront, which aren't far from here, everybody was saying the same thing. We actually had to have security. It was a little unsafe in the beginning, but now there's a soccer stadium being built. There's a dog park bar, apartments. There's all these things happening. 7 years ago, there wasn't going on. It was really difficult to get started. So I could even imagine, because we were on the riverfront, how much harder it would have been to start here. To your point, nothing was going on here. Nobody really knew it was happening down here. So let's talk about some of those challenges, because obviously you said parking, you've got the railroad, you've got those sort of things. So let's talk about just like some of the challenges that you've encountered, maybe the top couple challenges you've faced in opening this facility.
Yeah, so we're talking about the opening the facility. I'll focus around probably the public element to it, because this neighborhood is really set up for industrial in the modern day time. So yes, to your point, trains, they're difficult and annoying, but like our team is so used to it, we recognize it, we understand it. So really the biggest challenge that we do have, I would say, is the train, because the general public has no idea how to drive pretty much anywhere these days. And that's not a diss to the general public, because we're both part of the general public, because we're all so dependent upon our phones that we just listen to whatever it says. We don't even use logic into what we're thinking. We're like, mindless, tell me which left to take and which right to take.
And you get so pissed when you don't get there. You're like, what the hell?
Yeah. And so from that, there are several spots where trains like to sit on railroad tracks, and that becomes tough. There are dozens of ways around, but most people freeze up. And so that's absolutely, a challenge there. But really sticking to, the facility side of things, we've got now 100,000 square feet of finished space between this facility and then our warehouse facility on the other side of the railroad tracks. And in considering that, it opens up an entirely different set of challenges as to how you manage things, both from a mechanical system and from a cleanliness perspective. I mean, as stupid as this light doesn't work, right? How do you move things around? How do you track things? And we've gone through a lot of iterations of that, and getting that right, and being able to have because in my opinion, my background I came from, which I'm sure you said earlier you want to get into it, but I came from investment banking where I focused on poorly performing companies. And so from that, everything's all about fixing and improving, capital raising, and selling. And so it's this life cycle of a process. And so everything that I focus on here is minimize the downsides versus focusing on the upsides. And so every decision is typically made as to how do you ensure that it doesn't create a negative. And when you go through that approach, one of the biggest things is when I talked about carrots, first impressions, experience, think about that experience. If you're having that experience here on site and you were willing to sacrifice your Saturday to come down and try it for the first time here, and there's no toilet paper in the bathroom, how is your experience? If you're walking through a hallway and 3 of the 4 lights are out, how is your experience? Because it has to be immaculate. It has to be perfect. There has to be nothing to detract from it in order to make it so that when you are leaving, again, you have no negatives to say. You might have a personal preference that you claim you wish it was in downtown or the crossroads, whereas I could give you a timer and show you that the amount of time it takes to get to your destination in the middle or the heart of the crossroads versus here, it's the exact same. It just feels different because you have to drive a little bit further if you're coming south, but keeping in mind that people coming from the north, they're driving less. And huge parking lot, huge everything. So that's been a big one. Another one, honestly, with neighborhoods like this is, and you experience this a lot in the West Bottoms, is just the lack of care from property owners around you. And, it always takes one to start it off. And I mean, we've adopted the street, a mile's worth of street down here. Every single day, I am picking up trash outside. And it's just that there'll be trash on people's property and they just won't even pick it up. And not saying that they did it, sure, but they don't care about their neighborhood enough. And so it's really frustrating when you as a property owner and you have care, love, and you want to give attention to your neighborhood and you're working against the grain. And that's something that I really try to focus on. And then, really honestly, hopeful that some of these property owners that don't care for their properties, they want to sell their properties so that they actually care about the neighborhood, because it's so counterintuitive to me whenever they talk to me about how much they love this neighborhood and then they don't do anything about their trash. They don't maintain their buildings. They aren't willing to sell them for very, very above market rates to somebody who they know is going to give it love and care. So as a whole, it's a lot of the going against the grain, which is why they always say that the harder that the effort is, the more the reward should be down the road. And unfortunately, in these types of neighborhoods, I always have to use the term overinvest. And you have to overinvest in every aspect in order to keep the crowd, whether that be the real estate value or the software that helps run it.
Sure. No, it makes total sense. So when it comes to the hospitality side, I mean, you guys, I love it here. I'm down here all the time. Again, speaking to all the challenges we just talked about, there's a really quick and easy way down here. You don't have to go through the trains. I use it every single time I come down here. It only takes you once going through the trains and you realize there's a lot of other ways to get down here. But that being said, it just speaks to everything.
You go through the river market.
That, exactly. Or just off of 70 straight down is how I take it. But river market is also a great spot. You can see all that stuff. But to your point of, the hospitality side is, he's proven it, all the experience, everything you talked about, the focusing on the experience and everything is true, because it's not normal. It was hard to get down here in the beginning, all those things, but you guys have still just done amazing. And so let's talk about that for a second, because the hospitality side, your food, the history museum, the speakeasy, all those things, the events you're now doing, that's a lot. You guys have a huge space. You've got amazing drinks, amazing food. So how do you, manage all of this space and make sure you're able to deliver the perfect experience that you just talked about?
Yeah. So, the way that we sort of break that down on the hospitality side, and you can also understand that we're playing from behind. And I say that in the kindest way to ourselves, but we opened this building and we finished construction in July of 2019. And so if you just, everyone watching that understands, 8 months later, the world went to hell. And so being able to fight through that and recognize that all of our plans and our business model were completely eviscerated overnight, and we had to just find a way to survive and maintain. So being able to sort of work that through and discover how we needed to hold on in order to survive was a challenge in itself. And it wasn't really, honestly, until this spring that we feel that we have been able to begin executing on our hospitality business plan that we set out to implement starting in 2019. And being able to see it, it's kind of like everything we're doing now is a startup. So, I mean, we've got marketing team where some of the team is dedicated to the hospitality division alone. We've got a beverage team, we've got a culinary team, we've got a front of house team, we've got a tours and gift shop team that manages the front desk. So we have all of these different groups that all have different reporting structures that we're finally getting into realizing how we're doing it correctly. But to your point also, you talked about programming. And when trying to get people down to this neighborhood, programming, everyone recognizes that that's the key to success. So hard, though. It requires someone to come up with the ideas, someone to implement the technology aspect of it, someone to come up with the budget, someone to walk the creation of the event to the finish line, someone to set up the event, someone to put on the event, someone to take down the event, someone to then get feedback from the public on the event. And at the end of the day, you hope you make $1,000.
Yeah.
And so when you talk about it from that standpoint, a bit of what we do here, which is really beneficial to who we are and why I believe that our project works in this neighborhood, whereas a lot of others wouldn't. Specifically, I always say this when talking about real estate, that the reason why I feel a lot of really awesome restaurants that go in distressed neighborhoods don't work well is because they create just one thing. They have one thing that brings their specific crowd down, and their specific crowd isn't interested in the other things around it. So that crowd says, it's great, but there's not enough for me to do down there. And so on our end, what we look at is we have a lot of optionality here where, because we are producing a product in 75,000 of the square feet that we are managing that's finished, we're making a product that people can buy in 25 states and 3 countries. And so from that, if we can bring people down here for the first time and they see the type of experience that we are producing for them, it's not just the amount of money that they spend that is valuable to us. It's the brand impression. Because what we don't know, and I admit it's not 100% conversion, it's probably 10 to 20% conversion. But are those people, the next time that they're out at their neighborhood bar or restaurant, are they going to ask for, in their cocktail, Rieger vodka, Rieger gin, Rieger whiskey, whatever that is, whether they're in Kansas City or Washington, D.C. or Sacramento, California? You hope that if they see a bottle, they're willing to tell the bartender about that one time that they went down for this completely awesome event that we put on. And then the bartender's like, wow, it sounds like a really cool place. Maybe I should talk about this brand more. You never know in that sense, but because it's not single optionality of your dollars come into me today or you're dead to me, we have to treat everybody as if they're going to be residual. And so from that, it gives us that opportunity to always show our best light because A, we need them to come back and talk about this well, but B, we need them to love us when they're on the street.
Yeah, that makes total sense. And yeah, it's really hard to track something like that where it's like, how did my experience in their brain leave a big enough step that the next time they're somewhere and they buy it? There's no way to really track that, right? So that's really hard to do, but I completely can relate to that, especially from the programming side of things. Casey grew for 10 years. We've been throwing all these events. And to your point, COVID obviously shut all that down. So we had to pivot as well. And then after COVID, we just started looking at events that used to have thousands of people and make good money, like barely break even with 1,000 people or something like that. And so really, all this work of marketing planning, I mean, that's what we did. And we didn't have the food and beverage side to make any money off of. We just made money off sponsorship and tickets. Really hard to do. And people, wait till the last minute. There's just all these problems that you can't account for. And so the programming side is difficult. But, that's part of the reason Casey Crew's success is people like you and bars had needed that help with it. And so we've actually been throwing events for other bars and facilities for years. And that's kind of how we got our start. But I love that you guys have transitioned into doing it on your own because the brand just, I feel like it fits really well with the Kentucky Derby and just some of the other things that you guys have done have really been cool to see you guys do. So Let's talk about maybe one of the failures. So you talked about this perfection. What's one of the failures that led you a step closer to perfection of running the facility or an event you thought would work?
When thinking about the failures of, or the opportunities missed is probably a better way to say it. What I will say is that when you are doing construction on your home, whether it be your house or your business, that is not the time to be cheap. And I would argue that probably 95% of the time I adhered to that when we were building out this facility, with 5% of the time being moments where I was like, oh, we don't really need that. That's superfluous. Get rid of it. And architects, engineers are like, well, you would need it in this, or this scenario. And you're like, it's like once a year. Those are the moments in time that come back to haunt you all the time. And so what I will say is that when we built our patio and finished it in October of 21, that's when we officially launched the patio. I did not cut corners with it at all because I learned my lesson on just a handful of things on the core project within the historical renovation that enabled me to recognize that, okay, either this is a money-saving thing today and a problem later, or figure out the money today and I never deal with it again. And having that peace of mind with most of the stuff that you utilize is so vital and so important that I would always say that, and I live this way with my home as well, where at times when, when you are a service provider, you don't need to own your property, right? You are in the market for the best deal you can find, whether that be a rental deal or you want to own a building and own the real estate that you're leasing out, but you can move so quickly as a service provider. As a manufacturer, moving all of this stuff is nearly impossible. And so acquiring the property, knowing that it's going to be your home for a really long time, for us, we couldn't have 100,000 square feet of retail space down in this neighborhood. Just wouldn't work. But 25,000 with 75,000 being manufacturing, that works. And so for us, truly, it's all of those guest systems, all of those ease systems that, why did we make our generator a certain size? Why did we not make it even bigger? Why did we only hook certain things up to notifications on the building management system when we should have hooked everything up? Why do we have a middle tier RTU on the roof that provides air conditioning as opposed to a top tier? It's all of those little things that along the way you discover, what was I really thinking? And it's not throwing that out there. It's just money. It's every dollar you don't spend, as long as you're asking all the right questions, turns into problems you deal with down the road.
So now that you've been open and you feel like you're finally living out the plan you guys set 5-6 years ago, what are some of the biggest challenges you face running day to day in the facility?
As a whole now, it's because now that we are in traditional marketing mode, advertising mode, we're bringing significant number of people down here every single week. It's all about, from a facility standpoint, as silly as it is, making sure it works. I mean, it sounds ridiculous to say that because the public just assumes that when they show up to a place, it works. The drinking fountains are operating, the sinks spit out water, there's soap in the handhelds, the toilet flushes, there's ice to be put into my cocktail, whatever that is. Those are all things that the public just takes for granted that they require a lot of input and effort. And so it's an ongoing effort in order to have preventative maintenance teams coming in, to have on-site maintenance teams coming in, to have reporting systems that people in general look at and they know how to submit a problem forward that they recognize needs to be addressed. And I would argue that that's probably the biggest thing that companies struggle with, is having the staff take ownership in ensuring that the building looks perfect and feels perfect and operates perfect. Because that is, like on our team, for example, on the hospitality side at a minimum, their tips depend upon it. Their take-home pay depends upon people not just staying here longer when they're here, not just buying more while they're here, but coming back. And so, or when they leave, telling friends what an incredible experience it is, so that more people come in the future. And so it's getting that buy-in and that general building-wide ownership from the staff to recognize, hey, if I notice something is wrong, I need to alert somebody so that it gets fixed. And a very simple example is like even a silly furniture. If a chair breaks and no one wants to talk about it because they say that's not my problem, well, then if that was your table, you're down to that table being a 3-top, not a 4-top. And so now a lot of groups can't sit at your table. So if those groups can't sit at your table, then your tips are going to go down. So do you want to tell somebody this chair is broken and then immediately we're calling the furniture repair company and they're fixing the chair for $60, showing up one day and just knocking it out, making it perfect, and then it's back to a 4-top? Or do you want to basically make that table a table that no one gets seated at and you lose out on the money that you take home every night? And that's a really big thing that we're really, I wouldn't say struggling with now because a lot of our team has been bought in, but getting the team to buy into that mentality where originally they were like, I don't need to deal with the chairs, to recognizing, oh, if I don't want to deal with the chairs, then my tips go down, the bartender's tips go down, my coworkers' tips go down, and it affects everyone's take-home pay just because I claimed it wasn't my job.
Sure. And all I have to do is tell somebody else, like just get it off my plate. Like, hey, get that fixed, and then I won't have to worry about it anymore. So that's cool. So what does the next 3 years look like for the entertainment side of things, the entertainment side of things for J. Rieger & Co?
So for us, really, the next 3 years, when you're looking at both sides, I mean, I know you're asking entertainment, but the big thing is we're next year in 2024 going to begin releasing a lot of whiskeys in droves, and that's been part of our really business plan from the onset, was convincing investors that doing it the right way and letting it really take its time and only releasing things when they're ready, coming of age in the right quantities with the right strategy was what we were really buying for. And so that's where we are at in 2024 on that side. But for the on-site thing, we own some more properties right around here as well that we look to develop and turn into retail opportunities in order to better the neighborhood as a whole. And just being able to take what we have started here, knowing that we pretty much have the core of the team other than the hourly staff necessary, maybe 1 or 2 managers, being able to open additional spaces so that we're really creating truly a district within our own. Because right now, one of our biggest struggles is that what we have done is we have created not only what we believe is the best adult social experience, but we've created the best event experience as well. And our problem is that we have to ensure that the adult experience is preserved when having that event experience. Because at the end of the day, if you came down here, let's say 2 weekends in a row, and both times we said, Luke, we're so sorry, we're closed for a private event, you're probably going to stop coming down here. Mm-hmm. And so we all know that events are places that if you do them very, very well at a high-end point, you're going to be able to get a lot of more repeat business, a lot of recommendations. And the events are a place where you can add a lot of gravy onto the train as a whole. Whereas being able to have additional spaces creates more opportunities to either host events in other spaces or push the general public into those spaces while you have events in this building as a whole. So trying to, again, solve the problem for why are people not coming to neighborhoods such as this? What would make them eviscerate that blockage in their brain so that they want to come back? And like I said, it all falls down to the carrots, first impression, and the experience when they're actually here.
I love it. And before we wrap up, I got one more question for you, but make sure you check out Facility Ally. It's brought to you, the playbook is brought to you by Facility Ally. Check it out at facilityally.com if you're looking to automate some of your reservations, bookings, memberships, lesson leagues, camps, clinics, and more. So what is one book or podcast you'd recommend for the listeners at home about facility management or just something that may improve them?
I'm very, very boring. I'm not a big book reader. My wife will always admit that. She reads a lot of books, and I may read more than her. I'm a very current event guy. I read a lot on economy, geopolitics, economic and financial news for the U.S., and so that's kind of much more of a macro person. But, one of the things that I think has done me very, very well personally, and again, and I apologize, but it's just, I would try to relate everything macro into micro scenarios, is I've really gotten into listening to via podcast and reading various Berkshire Hathaway prerogatives and listening even to their annual meetings. and just listening to highly intelligent people that are not politically divisive in the way that they talk. And when they do inject an opinion that is absolutely a political slant, they admit to it, so that, again, the reader recognizes, all right, cool, like, this is the Democrats' approach, this is the Republicans' approach, whatever it may be. Those are things that I find to be highly enlightening, and obviously done by people that have had great success with it. But every business lesson, no matter what it is, whether it be a facility or it be brand or it be a manufacturing of a widget, everything relates. And so it's just about hearing about others' experiences and mentalities, and then deciding, or not, how do you apply that to the specific that you're trying to, the specific problem you're trying to solve, or the specific thing you're trying to fit it into. And so, like I said, just so many people have so many different motives and why they try to talk to people, and it's finding those individuals that speak about various topics that you recognize comes from a point of honesty. Most things that when people are talking to you, you're just like, like, this person's trying to get me to do this or do that, or influence me to feel this way about something. And the people that allow you to, here's the information raw, you fit it into however you want to fit it in, there's a lot of value to it.
No, I totally agree. Well, thank you for letting me come out and talk to you on the Facility Playbook, and thank you for pushing through all the challenges. And what you've done for Kansas City is amazing. I'm a big Kansas City fan, and this is one of my coolest, most favorite places. You're on the top of my list. Every time somebody says I want to go check out something in Kansas City, I tell them to come here, even though they don't like whiskey. So thank you for doing that. I know as an entrepreneur who's been at it for 11 years myself, it's not easy. So appreciate what you've done. I've never built anything like this, so can't imagine what that was like. But thank you very much. Appreciate it. I know you're out of whiskey, but cheers.
I got a little bit more. And then what about pepper?
Oh, don't forget Pepper. Pepper is our mouse hunter here on the Facility Playbook, or J. Rieger Co. Thanks for joining us today on the Facility Playbook. We'll see you next time. Cheers.
Woo!
It's fast.